today is, I don't even know the date.
November 18th.
November 18th, Saturday afternoon. We're in St. Augustine, Florida, and I'm here at the St. Paul's AME Church.
St. Paul AME Church.
AME Church with Reverend Rawls. Could you just introduce yourself? I'm Brenda Stroud with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program at the University of Florida. And if you could just introduce yourself for the record, please, and tell me a little bit about why we're here today.
Okay. I'm Ron Rawls, pastor of St. Paul AME Church here in St. Augustine, Florida. And today we're planning, it's what we consider phase 2 of our efforts to have some Confederate monuments moved. We have 2 of them. One that's on the city property in what everyone knows as a slave market here in St. Augustine, but they've changed the name, but everybody still knows it as a slave market. And the other is right next to it on University of Florida property. And so we started an effort in August to have those monuments removed. I feel like it's very inappropriate to have those symbols in public spaces. And so we did that. We tried the dialogue part, and from the dialogue, the response from the commission, it didn't appear that they were able to stand in our shoes. And so the city manager, his recommendation pretty much said that, well, the matter is too divisive to consider removing them, and so we'll contextualize. But that says a lot to me, because every African American that spoke in that public meeting spoke against. And so to say it's too divisive means that the dominant portion of our community, there's going to be a disturbance in that, because apparently there's no concern about all the African American voices that spoke to remove them. And so we had those conversations. Each city commissioner sounded as if they had bought into the whole lost cause story. And I have my opinions of that rewrite of history. And so phase 2, once that dialogue didn't work, now we're stepping up, and tourism is a major industry in St. Augustine, the largest industry in St. Augustine. And so now we're touching the tourism industry, and we've chosen the Nights of Lights, one of the biggest events in St. Augustine. National Geographic defines it as one of the 10 wonders of the world. And so there are already going to be thousands of people here. And I think anytime you protest, no need to protest by yourself. It's good to protest when people, and so we need for outside people to see what we're dealing here. Actually, in 1964, well, before that, when Dr. Halen was fighting the civil rights struggle, it was so difficult in St. Augustine, being a real southern stronghold, that he just had no success. And so he actually called Dr. King to come, knowing that Dr. King would bring outside cameras, and other people outside of this area would be able to see what they were dealing with. And Dr. King came, and Dr. King was arrested, and they were beaten and almost killed. But the world was able to see how vicious the racism was in St. Augustine, and because of that, it triggered the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And so that's kind of what you have to do in St. Augustine once the dialogue doesn't work. You have to bring others in to see, and then as they attempt to protect their tourism or protect the things that are dear to them, and then they're more apt to listen. And so that's what we're hoping from tonight.
So MLK came to this church?
Preached in that pulpit, sat in that middle chair.
Nice, nice. Can you tell me where exactly the monuments are located that you're talking about, and maybe a little bit about each one of them, if you know?
Yes. And so the one that's on the city property, after the Civil War, about 1872, the Ladies Memorial Association, they had a desire to place that monument in the middle of the town plaza. And but the city leadership really understood the message they were trying to send. And it's a message that's wrapped in intimidation, that basically says we lost the war, but in very obvious places, in public spaces, we're going to put something there to remind you that we're still in charge. And so the leadership in 1872 denied it. And so they went and put it on Catholic property. And but in 1879, the leadership changed. And when the leadership changed, and at that point, they were allowed to put it there, and were given a 99-year lease. Well, we learned as we were going through this that actually that lease expired in 1978. and that was brought to the city commission. It's actually sitting on city property under an expired lease agreement, and that was just that was a give me if the city really had a will to move it, because their lease expired 39 years ago. The city they wouldn't even entertain that presentation or that fact. And but so that's the first one, made by the Ladies Memorial Association, finally erected in 1879. And then the other one is on UF property, and that one, actually, it's a monument that has the names listed to the Confederate dead. And so Confederate people that were from this area, their names are listed on that. And I think it's just a more appropriate place. The Confederacy did two things that I think that makes it inappropriate to have it in public spaces. One, they're traitors. And they seceded from the United States and fought against the United States and shed U.S. Blood of United States citizens. And but not only are they traitors, in addition to being traitors, as this country was trying to go in a direction, make progress and go in a better direction, what they did was fought against that in order to maintain a system of slavery. And I understand that they needed that. Their economy was based on free labor. And but when this country fought to go in a better direction, a different direction, as it relates to how they treat blacks, these people fought against it, and so I don't think they should be on monuments and revered. So that's the story of the one that's on the city property. The one that's on UF property, it was placed there by the Daughters of the Confederacy in 1920. And that's pretty much it. There's a guy named General William Loring that it honors. He fought in a few wars. If you go back and pay attention to the wars, it seems like all the wars were against. He has a real real ugly past, and this guy was ferocious, and so what they did, he was buried, and they went and got his ashes. He had died in the 1800s, but they got his ashes, and where they set the monument over there, they put the ashes in the area also. And so that's the one with Loring. One thing that's really important that people just don't want to accept here in St. Augustine is that the Ladies Memorial Association, those were popular around the 1870s, 1880s, but then around the end of the 1880s, beginning of the 1890s, they began to phase out. And then they kind of merged, or not legally, but they kind of became morphed into what was called the Daughters of the Confederacy. And then the Daughters of the Confederacy, all throughout the country, they placed these monuments. And then now here in St. Augustine, we actually have what's called the United Daughters of the Confederacy. And they're actually on the Southern Poverty Law Center as an organization to watch because of its affiliation or connection to racist organizations. And but that doesn't seem to even faze the people here in St. Augustine. They just have their lost cause story that they've kind of written to glorify that Confederacy, and they don't pay attention to those kind of facts. Right.
So both of these monuments are in the Plaza de la Constitution?
Well, one is in the plaza, and then across the street from the plaza, the next block is the UF property, and that's called the Government Building. And so on that property is where the General Loring's, where his is.
Okay. From what I understand, they have already placed a plaque in an attempt to contextualize one of the monuments. Do you know about that at all?
Yeah. So what they did when we had the meetings, we had two, one in August and another in October, hearings before the City Commission. A lot of testimony, probably about, a lot of people that came and spoke up, probably about 6 hours of public comments. And then so what they did is they asked the city manager to bring a recommendation. And basically what he said, now if you would listen to his presentation just, it spoke exactly what these monuments mean.
What's his name?
His name is John Regan. And he talked about, what the reason for these monuments being erected. He was very clear. But then in his recommendation, he backed way off of the presentation and said, but ours is different. Every other one in the country is, were erected for races, intimidating reasons. But then he said, ours is different. And he kind of and he said that because ours was put up in 1879, and so ours is not like the ones that was put up in the 1910s, 1920s, and so, and the commission bought that. But I think that's what they wanted him to bring back, and so what he said. But to kind of appease, says, what we'll do is contextualize it. Now, contextualizing for me is to say that these men are traitors, really clear. That these men that you're looking at, these are traitors against the United States of America. They're not patriots. These are traitors against the United States of America, and they fought to maintain slavery. But I guarantee you, they will not contextualize. They will not contextualize that way. They'll whitewash it, and then they'll come back. They'll have a group that'll come back and tell them what they want to hear, so that their people can still be glorified in public spaces, and then everybody will be happy, because just the little black people, they're the only ones that's upset. But we appease them by contextualizing, but it won't be true. I guarantee you it won't be true contextualization that calls them traitors.
So I think they have put one up, didn't you say, Deborah? Have you seen what it says at all?
Well, it's just a sign that says that we, in the future, where we have a committee that's putting together to contextualize the monument, and so it's just to appease us. But I have a degree from University of Florida in religion, and so I'm a little bit smarter than that. I understand what they're doing.
So, what's your contact with UF's monument?
So UF, I've been reaching out, and so what they've been doing is kind of like, we had a meeting here at the church in the beginning, and church was full, and UF's guy just kind of sat back in the back and watched. And then at the city commission meetings, I was told that they were watching on live stream. But I've reached out to UF, and UF has not reached back to me. And so what happened when I saw the Richard Spencer thing was going on in Gainesville, and the UF president, he got on CNN, and he literally seemed like he really had empathy and concern for racial issues, and he felt that he was touched. He could stand in the shoes. And so when I saw his talk on CNN about the whole Richard Spencer man, I was like, wow, maybe he does care. And so I reached back out.
President Fox.
Yeah. And so I reached back out to President Fox, and but I still never got a response. And so what it almost tells me is that they're willing to have an image. They conform to the place. And so in Gainesville, Gainesville is a different place from St. Augustine. And so there's one rhetoric in one set of words that are said in Gainesville. But when you're dealing with St. Augustine, and you have property in St. Augustine that sends a very racist message, but you have nothing to say, because I'm sure they know about it. I've sent him communication, and I actually said, hey, I really admire what was said. But it's strange that there's no response when it appeared that he really had concern and empathy for what we were talking about, what we're dealing with.
Were there any other administrators that you've reached out specifically to at UF?
I haven't reached out to anyone. I figured if I got it to the top would send it to where it needed to be, and then they would respond. And so what I've been doing is trying to get the publication outlets in Gainesville to tell our story. And so we had the Gainesville Sun, they did a piece for us. A couple weeks ago, last week, the Alligator did a piece for us. Today, WUFT is going to be here to participate in the march. And so I'm hoping that UF will be a leader. They mentioned when they responded to the Gainesville Sun and the Alligator that that they were watching to see what was going to happen to St. Augustine. But why would UF, a leader, a leader in the state, why would they watch to see what's going to happen in St. Augustine? I'm hoping that their plans aren't to conform to St. Augustine's plan. I'm hoping that they're critical thinkers and free thinkers, to where that they can address this issue themselves without taking the lead from St. Augustine, because St. Augustine doesn't have a history of really dealing with these kind of issues well. And so I think UF could teach St. Augustine a better lesson.
Yeah, I saw that one article that said they were concerned, I guess, because the monument has ashes nearby it.
Yeah,
so
they said
I guess it's the Loring one. Yeah. So, but if you could connect any one direct event or set of events to what might have initiated your attempts at getting these monuments removed. Could you do that at all?
Yeah, so I've seen them for a while, but St. Augustine is a different place. And so you really have to be wise when you pick your battles in St. Augustine. And so I'm very active, whether I'm fighting for infrastructure, for low-income neighborhoods, whether it's redistricting or voting or whatever the issues are, I'm very engaged. Disparities in education, disparities in employment. I took advantage of a tight mayor's race in 2014 and addressed the fact that we had no black police officers, no black firefighters, and only 3% black employment with the city. They already knew, I already complained, but nobody would listen. But during the mayor's race, I was able to highlight that, and then the media grabbed it for me. And then once the media grabbed it, then St. Augustine didn't like that. And so we were able to put together what we call an accountability group. It's a team that I've put together. We meet monthly with the city manager. And so now we have black firefighters, we have black police officers, and their employment has gone from 3% to 7%. But that only happened, now the city will list it and all the great things they do because they love black people. But in reality, if we wouldn't have done our part to push them, that would have never been addressed. And so I deal with a lot of issues. But I've seen those, and I just knew that there's no way in St. Augustine that I could get momentum to get something like that done. And so just waiting for the right moment. Actually, in May, the mayor contacted me, and I brought this up in August. In May, the mayor contacted me because of what had happened in Charlottesville, and said, hey, what's your take on the monuments? And I told her, I said, I don't agree with the monuments being there, but I just can't fight that fight right now. I can't. I know I won't. I know it won't work. And then 3 months later, it was just really, I'm a person of faith, and it was really pressing me pretty hard that you have to step out there, and now is the moment that needs to be seized. And so I did something as simple as went out and did a Facebook Live video, and then talked about the monuments in the Facebook Live video. And the next thing you know, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, you have all these views, and now people are coming. And so we set up a meeting at the church. Church was packed, and then all of a sudden the Nazis, the white supremacists, the white nationalists, all of them came out with their hate stuff and their threatening things. And I'm like, oh, this is the perfect time. And so it just had to be the right moment. And so that's, as simple as that sounds, that's how it came out, with a Facebook Live video on August, I think it was August 18th, I believe.
So you are, one of the purposes in the march, I understand, is of course to get people to take notice. Mm-hmm. But so you're standing firm on the removal of the monuments. Yes, and you're not happy with their offer of contextualization, no, right?
It won't work. They won't be honest. They won't be true in right. The contextualization. I know St. Augustine. They won't be true. They'll go and get some scholars that think like them, and but it'll make them feel good. And those scholars will come back and they'll say something that really won't deal with the crux. That really won't deal with the meat of the matter, that these were traitors that fought to maintain a system of slavery. They won't say that.
How do you perceive the so-called slippery slope premise that's out there, that if we start taking down Confederate monuments, then the next thing you know, we'll be taking down monuments of Washington and Jefferson and everyone in our history that ever owned any slaves? Or how do you perceive that or understand?
I want to be real clear. Slavery was a part of life. And so you can't go back and punish everybody that owned a slave. That was just the way things were. So my issue has nothing to do with people that owned slaves. These were people, when our country wanted to turn in a better direction and progress, that fought against that progress, that fought to maintain a system of slavery. And so the fact that someone owned slaves, it was a way of life. And so, that's just something you have to deal with. But when our country wanted to be better, these people fought against our country to keep our country in a place to where it was. And their rise was Jim Crow. And, so The slavery piece is not my argument. The fact that they fought to maintain it when our country wanted to go in a different direction, there's no reason you should glorify that. And everybody says you're erasing our history. Nobody's going to forget about the Confederacy if those monuments move. Those monuments standing right there, they're going to still be waving their flags. They're going to still be, glorifying their movement. But that's just the talking point. And then when they say, and then sometimes they say, well, if you remove this, they're going to remove Dr. King, or they're going to remove that or remove that. I don't care about. People are always trying to distract the conversation, and my focus right now is on those Confederate monuments, and I can't operate. Andrew Young said something, and I have much respect for him, but he said something that he did an interview about they were talking about the up in Georgia, and he said, I don't think that we should be, removing monuments. And then he said, because you don't want to upset a racist majority, because then they'll start taking down statues of Dr. King and monuments of civil rights leaders. Okay, so my problem with that is that him and Dr. King didn't operate out of fear. They were forceful, they knew what they wanted, and they were not fearful of what the racist majority would do in response. They confronted it. And so I have all the respect for him, but the same type of fighter that he was, the same type of fighter that Dr. King was, now it's our turn, and we're not going to operate out of fear. We're not going to say we're not going to do that. We don't want to begin pulling down Confederate monuments because we're afraid they're going to pull ours down. And we have to have the courage to go and fight our fight, and whatever happens after, it happens after. But we're responsible now for making sure, like Dr. King said, justice rolls down like a mighty river.
Do you have any specific plans moving forward in communication with both the city or the university?
Yeah, I have great communication with the city. We work well together. We get a lot done with indirect racial issues, but it's this direct. That monument, that's their God. There's some things that are gods to some of these people. Monuments, flags. I mean, these things are directly racial issues, and that's when you see the fangs come out. And so I have a great relationship with the city, but because I'm dealing with a directly racial issue, and unfortunately the majority of the people in St. Augustine, there's a reason why it's still a deep South stronghold. And so issues like this, you have to fight. And so, we're going to, tourism is important to them. The black population might not be important to them. We're only 6% in the county and only 11% in the city. And so our voices might not be that important to them when it deals with direct racial issues. But if we start touching that tourism and they start getting the black eye as it relates to tourism, I got a feeling they'll start listening to us. Still might not take the monuments down, but we're going to put up our best fight.
Good. Anything specific plans for UF, or do you think that you're just gonna concentrate on making a big voice? Yeah,
I'm hoping we're really hoping that the national media can catch our story, because I think that it's a story that's worthwhile, and I know that when UF gets touched in a national picture as being an ally to the Confederacy, I think UF will respond a little bit better and be more of a leader than a follower.
Okay, cool. That's good for me. You got anything you want to add on top of all of this?
No, I thank you and the work that you do, and we're just looking forward to a wonderful march. We have a lot of threats that have come today. Where they're planning to egg us. They have groups that are coming there that have said that this is not going to turn out good for me. And so we got a lot of threats out there, but we're not concerned, because they're just like yapping dogs, just barking, trying to turn us around. They've got a group that's going to meet us here to try to turn us around so we don't get there. But this will be a good time for that song, Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around.
Okay, so you have to make me a promise. You're
okay.
going to talk to me at a later date after tonight.
Yes, ma'am.
And let me know, and we're going to follow up on this and see how it all went.
Yes, ma'am, definitely.
That sounds great.
Definitely.
I'm looking forward to it.
I am also.
And maybe I'll get hit with an egg too.
Now, see, I love Jesus, but I'm hoping I can use two cheeks. I know he says turn the other cheek, but I'm hoping that he keeps me to the point. But I'm not quite Dr. King, but I'm wanting a peaceful rally really bad. But I'm not at Dr. King's level yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's super nice to meet you, and I'm looking forward to the next time we meet.
All right. Thank you, madam.
Thank you.